Will he stay or will he go? Prime Minister Justin Trudeau this week seemingly survived the most significant test to his leadership yet, with dozens of MPs organizing to ask him to step down at this week's caucus. Trudeau came out of that meeting insisting his party is strong and united, and a day later insisted he's staying on as leader. But the calls for him to step down have not been quashed. Some disaffected MPs are giving him until tomorrow to reflect, and if he doesn't call it quits, they're threatening unspecified consequences. Trudeau, meanwhile, took another hit this week when he walked back a major Liberal policy announcing significant cuts to Canada's permanent immigration targets.
Because in the tumultuous times as we emerged from the pandemic, between addressing labour needs and maintaining population growth, we didn't get the balance quite right.
Also still looming large is the Bloc Québécois ultimatum and its Tuesday deadline that the Bloc start negotiating with other opposition parties to topple the Liberal government if the government doesn't ensure two Bloc-led bills become law. So, can Trudeau maintain his fragile hold on power, and where do the Liberals go from here? Time for the Sunday strategy session to answer those questions. Corey tonight was Ontario Premier Doug Ford's campaign manager and former Director of Communications for Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Scott Reid is a former Communications Director to Prime Minister Paul Martin. And Kathleen Monk is a former NDP strategist and Director of Communications to the late Jack Layton. Hi, everybody.
Hey there.
Scott, I'll start with you. I've spent the last number of days talking to people who are inside that room, and I think it's fair to say that the ask of the Prime Minister was not just a few people. It was at least a couple dozen MPs who, without malice or I've heard, without anger, just said, please, would you consider this? Because we really do think we're going to lose with you at the helm of the party. Does it surprise you that Prime Minister 18 hours came out and said, well, I'm done reflecting, I'm staying?
It probably doesn't surprise me, but I know it angered a lot of people. I know it angered a lot of people in that room, and I've talked to folks just as you have who told me precisely the same thing. And, I think if the Prime Minister's objective over the last 48 hours is to demonstrate closure on this issue and to say, all right, we've given them their chance, we listened, we were respectful, and now it's time to move forward, I don't think that objective has been realized. There's no whistling past this graveyard. There's going to be more to come. That's pretty clear. And the problem for the Prime Minister fundamentally is that this is an iceberg rebellion. We're seeing the tip of it above water with 24 members of Parliament willing to walk to the microphone, look him in the eye, give their reasons that he should leave, not with anger, as you say, even with reluctance and respect, but nevertheless conclude that he can't lead the party in the next election. And below the waterline lurk so many more. Whether the Prime Minister wishes to acknowledge it to the public, to his advisors, to himself, he knows that to be true, and that is a heavy weight to drag around. This issue is not closed, it's not going away, and it really does weigh the party and the Prime Minister down badly.
Corey, you've been close to people who have led as premiers, as prime ministers. If something like this unfolded before them, like what do you anticipate happens next? Do you think it is plausible that the Prime Minister continues to insist, we're strong, we're united, and we just go forward?
I don't think it's viable for him to stay over the long term or even the medium term. But he's demonstrated a level of self-delusion that I've never seen before in politics, to be honest. To come out of that caucus meeting, as you described it, and have the top line that you give the media to be that we're strong and united, while you're 20 points back and a third of your, 20% of your caucus is an open rebellion. And, as Scott mentioned, it's like an iceberg. We all know that it's way, way, way more people than those who stood up at the mic or signed that letter. It's virtually everyone in Liberal voter land that actually wants to see him gone. I just don't see how you can stay if that's the case. It's not viable.
What do you think about that, Kathleen? I will point out there were more MPs that asked him to leave, but there were, I'm told, like somewhere around 15 who also expressed support for him.
For sure. I think there's a truism in politics, and that is that speed kills. And the problem is when you use speed in politics, it can help quash kind of negative attacks, it can help shape the media narrative, it can help define your opponent. And the problem with this kind of mutiny that's been happening with the Liberals is it's been slow motion. Like, it's been slow motion, it's been going on for over a year. And the speed
Sounds like the worst breakup I've ever had, just watching it. I said that to someone the other day, like, oh my God, when's this isn't going to end.
Exactly. And the speed problem's on both sides, to be clear, right? Like the caucus hasn't moved with any force. There's no clear ultimatum. It just seems like they're going to be sleepwalking into political oblivion, right? And the speed problem is also on that of the Prime Minister. He could have gotten ahead of this 6 months ago. It's stuff we've been saying on this show and in other places for well over 6 months, that they could come with an action plan and do something. But right now, what is possible for the Liberals? If they go into a Liberal leadership right now, I want to present a couple risks. Like, first of all, they risk a lot of infighting. There's going to be a fight between corporate Liberals and more socially progressive Liberals. There's also a massive risk, frankly, that there's just no clear alternative. And that is what they face. And that's why I think they've kind of gotten into this sleepwalking area, that they don't know what to do. The caucus coup hasn't been strong enough, and Trudeau hasn't presented a plan, so they are literally just sleepwalking. They're dead party walking, so to speak.
Scott, I'll get you to respond to that. And it is interesting that, what we discussed last week, and in particular there was a lot of reaction from our audience, the idea that, they would come to caucus with this advance notice prepared to say, here's what we are going to do to counter the sentiment that you're getting at the doors. Like, here's our action plan into the next election. That didn't happen. The one thing that everyone was able to coalesce around was, we want to beat Pierre Poilievre, and the Conservatives, and the way in which they tried to underscore that this week was to talk about the fact that Poilievre refuses to get his security clearance in order to see classified information about foreign interference. Is that pivot working in your view, and is it a strategy that can work over the long term?
I think it's working unto itself. It's the first and best clock on the jaw that the Prime Minister's had on Poilievre in quite some time, and he's clearly on the defensive about it. And now with the Bloc leader getting his security clearance, it's only going to intensify the questions. But over the medium term, it doesn't fix any of the fundamental challenges that the Prime Minister face. I'll just respond to Kathleen. I mean, she's right. But in some ways, what's most problematic about all of this for the Prime Minister is that it isn't actually this dissent isn't galvanized around an ambitious alternative. It is genuinely a sincere statement of frustration and anxiety about the consequences of remaining with the Prime Minister. It's solely a judgment on him, and he's not fighting for his job, as you point out, Vashi. If you think about it, he's not fighting. He's simply saying, I don't even need to fight. It's my job and you can't take it. Go fly a kite. And so he's not offering an alternative plan. He's not offering any change. And when you talk to members of the Parliament, they will say to you, as they said to his face in caucus, you promised us a plan and you promised us a road back. You promised that at National Caucus in London. You promised that after the June by-election loss. It still hasn't come. And the Prime Minister, to be blunt, is not offering it now. That is quite telling.
I'm sort of convinced, Corey, that the plan is to keep presenting the types of policies that they have, which my sense is they truly believe resonate with Canadians, and to go on the attack more on Poilievre in a way that will pay off for them during the campaign. And I think that they do feel, and I've certainly heard from a lot of Canadians that they agree that the punch around not getting security clearance is landing for them, and that there's more of that to come. But I don't think they feel like they need some brand new policy landscape to put forward beyond what they've already done.
Well, I guess I question who they is, right? Like, I don't think the answers that they've given on this are satisfactory to certainly Canadians, if you look at the polling. Or even their own caucus. Like, I think that, what we've seen is them just doing more of the same things, only doing it louder, doing it again, expecting somehow they're going to get a different result. It's almost Monty Python-esque. Like, at a certain point, the Prime Minister's in his own little world here, where he thinks that if he just keeps repeating that he's putting a price on pollution and that everyone should be grateful for a carbon tax and that somehow it magically is putting more money in your bank account than it's taking out. All of these messages are, they haven't worked. And I don't think it's due to a lack of repetition. I think it's because they're just not very compelling messages.
Kathleen wants to
I know Corey will disagree with me, but I actually think the message on foreign interference is one that will have impact. Canadians don't understand why someone who wants to be Prime Minister won't actually go and get the security clearance. It's not a choice between whether, when you become Prime Minister, frankly, you're going to have to get the security clearances and do the media. You actually have to do both. That's the nature of the job. You want the promotion, you got to get the clearance and do the work. And people understand that. They don't want you to choose your party over your country. When the country's at threat, whatever whatever the nature of that threat is, any politician needs to be unified in their stance to defend our country and do whatever it takes to do that. And right now, Poilievre is choosing not to take the security clearance, get the information he needs to make the analysis, and no counter argument or rebuttal from his spokesperson or from him is going to fix that. He needs to get briefed in, and he needs to do the work of the job that a future prime minister, if he's going to be one, has to do.
And just really quickly, as far as a strategy for the Liberals, what's your impression of? I know, like, obviously that lands to a degree, but like, bigger picture, do they need to do more than say?
Well, as we've been saying on the show, they need to do all of the things all at once and at the same time, right? So they do need to be hitting hard on Poilievre, but they do need to create a plan. Like, we do need to hear from the campaign director what they're going to roll out and how Justin Trudeau, if he is going to be, leading this party into the next election, is going to try to change the narrative. One clear route for New Democrats is we know that healthcare is an issue, and Corey has fought me in this for over a year now. But if we could pivot the issue set back on healthcare, there is a chance where New Democrats polling a little bit higher could actually sweep and kind of come up the middle, because healthcare is still the #1 issue for Canadians, and getting those family doctors, those nurse practitioners into their communities to have the healthcare they need is one way we could turn around the conversation.
Okay, I wish you the best of luck. I know everyone wants to respond, and we'll save it for next week. Thank you very much. I appreciate the discussion. Corey tonight, Scott Reed, and Kathleen Monk, our Sunday strategy session.